Welcome back. Today we're discussing publishing with Blue Ink Press. And now we're joined by author Scott Gates to discuss the relationship between writer and publisher. And Scott, great to see you, and thank you for doing this.
Yeah, Bill, thanks for having us.
So you look like an author too. You got that author look. What's your background? Tell us about yourself.
Well, I was not always an author. I grew up in Alabama. Professionally, I started a career in corporate communications. Have done some in publishing, but magazine publishing.
Okay.
So moved around the country some, met my wife out in Colorado, but she grew up in the Southeast, and we really felt the need to get back this way. So eventually we settled in Virginia for a while, and it was there, Northern Virginia. There's a lot of history in Northern Virginia, a lot of Civil War history, and I mean, obviously, just in the Washington, D.C. area, it goes all the way back.
Yeah.
So I think there I had started to write, this is like early 2000s. I started to write what I thought would be a short story just about a guy in a period that I thought was interesting in that area. And it just kept going. So I never would have thought that I could have written anything long form, but a short story turned into a novel over a span of some years. But that was when I was in my early to mid 30s. So you never know when that spark's going to catch.
Did you always have this kind of love for storytelling? Or?
Yeah, my parents were big readers. My dad was a magazine editor, and he worked for newspapers also. So he wrote some like fiction, short stories, things like that. So I was interested in it. I wrote some short stories and personal essays when I was in high school and college, but again, never fathomed being able to write more than that. I just didn't understand the structure of a novel. How do you sit down and do that?
Well, when did you finally realize, hey, I might be pretty good here? And where do you go next?
So I got to the point where I had what I thought was a finished, complete story, and sat down to figure out how I was going to get that published. And there's a few different routes you can take. One, I know you've had self-published authors on the show, and that has come a long way. That's actually, you can do a lot more with self-publishing than you used to. And several have seen success that way. But I was more interested in kind of the traditional publishing model. And I do encourage first-time authors to look into that, even though it's daunting. From my perspective, you as the writer, you've put in the hours and the time. Now it's time to hand it over to somebody else to put in some, collateral to this project, right? So in my head, I was going to go after one of the big 5 publishers, New York, Chicago. And to do that, you have to have an agent. So I sat down and I did some research, and I found the agent. I thought this is how it worked. I found the one agent that surely would be interested in this. And I sent them an email and the manuscript and never heard back from them. And sure, realistically, you're probably not going to hear back when you query somebody like that out of the blue. So I did that to about 80 agents.
Wow.
Heard back from a third of them maybe, saying no thank you. Eventually, I stepped back and started looking at independent publishers. So there's a lot of strengths there that appealed to me. A lot of times they're more local. They work with a smaller pool of authors and are a lot more hands-on. I like all this. And so my wife had found a workshop in Wake Forest put on by Page 158 the bookstore in Wake Forest in conjunction with Blue Ink Press. Sherry and Amanda were presenting on how to get published. So I thought, well, my wife saw it and was like, you need this. So I went there kind of reluctantly and got a lot out of it. And Amanda I told them what I had been doing, and Amanda said, well, let me take a look at your query letter, and looked at it and said, this is garbage. So no wonder you're not hearing back from anybody. And let me look over it and give it some edits. And then, hey, if you've got a manuscript, go ahead and send that over to we're interested in what you're up to. So I never got edits back from that query letter. But about 2 weeks later, Sherry called me and said, hey, you want to get some coffee? And so I figured it was not about the query letter edits. And sure enough, she had found time to read the manuscript and liked it. And that was Hard Road South, which they published in 2020. How's
that been working out for you? I mean, author and publisher, you both have, as you mentioned, collateral in the project itself.
Like I said, the benefit of a local independent publisher doesn't have to be local to you as the author. But in my case, I thought it was phenomenal, especially after my experience sending letters off into the void of New York and wherever. The ability to meet with Sherry and Amanda at a coffee shop and talk about the book was huge for me. And, I'll continue to pester Sherry and stop by her house and pick up copies of the book and talk. We're going to be talking about marketing coming up here pretty soon, just taking the time to, a little one-on-one, face-to-face meeting, and it goes a long way in building everybody's success.
Well, I know you're going to continue to write, and you're very successful. You can see some of the books on our table here, but I want to ask you one last thing, Scott. For the folks who are home right now watching you and have always dreamed to do what you're now doing, any tips, any advice?
Well, I would say don't find the form daunting. If you want to write a novel and have that in your mind, just segment it out. Take it one step at a time. When I had started, like I said, I started as a short story, and then I was building each chapter almost like its own little short story, just connected to others. So as far as wrapping your head around it, that's one way you can get into it. Just do the writing. And as far as planning, some writers plot out the entire book and they have sticky notes on the wall and string and all that. I have not found that to work for me. They call it plotting, where you plan it out like that, or pantsing, where you just fly by the seat of your pants as far as writing a novel and structuring it.
You're a fly by the seat of the pants guy.
I'm a plantser. I kind of do a little bit of both.
All right.
But I do find it helpful to at least map out a chapter outline as far as I can get right to that point, and then maybe see where the book goes, because you're not always going to know what happens in the end. Even if you think you do, things change. But just be open to that whole process. And I think obviously you have to enjoy writing. So if it's something you enjoy, just do it. I do it in my free time as a kind of a stress reliever. I have a journalism background, so for me, writing fiction is a break from having to get all the facts straight. Yeah.
So Scott, what's coming up next? You got another book in mind?
I do. So I'm working on something, and this is kind of a funny story too, and also an example of how the relationship between a publisher and an author, especially an independent publisher, can be beneficial. So I had an idea for a third book that was kind of set in the same world as the first two. And one is not a sequel of another, but there are, if you're paying attention, there's a character or two that might pop up in this series. So it's going to be more historical fiction set in Eastern North Carolina, and I might get there eventually. But I was kind of having a hard time starting that. So I gave Sherry a call and I said, I've got these two ideas. One is this, the historical fiction. The other one has aliens in it. So what do you think about that? Because I was I was hesitant to even bring it up. But she liked the idea, and it's not all science fiction, but it's actually a lot of historical fiction in there also. But she encouraged me to go that route, to try something a little different. And it's been challenging for me to work in that different genre, but also interesting. And I've met with other science fiction writers and kind of connected with that whole group, which is a different and exciting group. So it's still something I'm working on, hammering away at, but it's my current project.
Well, you meet with other writers. For the folks who may want to talk to you, Scott, can they do that? Do you interact with folks?
Yes, I'm always happy to talk to other writers, and there's a great author network here in North Carolina. We are all very supportive of each other and those who are trying to get published. So folks can get in touch with me either at scottmgates.com or on Facebook and Instagram at scottmgates.
And don't send the first draft. I found that out today on the show. Don't send the first draft.
Yeah, apparently.
Scott, what a pleasure, and congratulations on the books. And I'm glad Blue Ink could be here as well. And so if you have the dream, hey, reality's right here locally. You can take advantage of it. And thank you for watching. We hope you've enjoyed today's show. If you have any questions or you would like to know more, visit our websites at RaleighCW.com and myRDCTV.com. I'm Bill LeMay. Thank you for watching Community Matters, and we'll see you next week.